I just think it's challenging. I was like, it's not easy. Change is never easy, and changing mindset is always very difficult. I ended up working for an educational software company. I was one of the only native English speakers there, and they said, "Hey, can you write content for us?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can write whatever you want. I'm a great writer. Can you get organic traffic with what you write?" I'm like, "Sure, sure." Marketing teams who've been running TV ads since the 70s haven't had this problem. Marketing teams who are digital based have had this problem for a long time, but don't know they've had this problem until right now.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the AI SEO Insider Podcast. I'm Chris Ralph, an AI SEO and GEO, Generative Engine Optimization expert. And I'm also the founder of Boulder SEO Marketing. This podcast is where we cut through the AI hype and where I talk to people who are getting real results. I'm super excited for Mordy Oberstein. Is that how I say your last name, Mordy?
Nailed it.
Sweet.
Nailed it.
Uh, Head of brand at SE Ranking, formerly head of SEO brand at Wix. To join me, Morty is one of the most opinionated, in my opinion, and most, I would say, useful voices in our space right now on what brand actually means in an AI-driven search world. So this is what I would like this topic to be: branding in the age of AI. How does that sound, Morty?
That first off, I've never shy away from being called opinionated, so thank you. And that sounds great.
Awesome. So let's talk about branding in the age of AI. It's I think something that you have a lot of experience in. So you've been at SE Ranking, one of my favorite AI SEO tool for a few months now. How's the new gig going?
First off, it's great. Team is super sweet. The industry is so interesting right now, and so from a brand point of view, I don't like break like the fourth wall like too much. But first off, it's really interesting to see SEO coming around to brand a little bit. I think that speaks right into our wheelhouse. We have an add-on called Planable. It's not an add-on really. It's its own social media platform called Planable, which is our
Yeah.
sister company. And part of the really interesting part of that is to see the social analytics intersection of what happens in with AI, right? So you get mentioned in an LLM, and what happens next is the big question. But one of the things that happens is that people will then Google or search for the product. So let's say I'm looking for I don't know, shoes. Like, what are the best shoes? And it puts Nike there. I'm oversimplifying this with a giant brand. And if I Google, oh, are Nike shoes good? Nike's knowledge panel might show up, or some of the top results that'll show up are social media profiles. So I might end up moving to social from the LLM to search to social very, very quickly. So seeing that like whole intersection play out firsthand is super interesting for me, which I know I'm just geeking out. Ask me how my job is, and I'm just kind of like geeking out on like what's happening in the ecosystem.
I mean, it truly is fascinating. And I mean, luckily, I got into this about 30 years ago. So, Morty, we're,
Don't
I
date
think,
yourself.
yeah, no, man, it was before Google was called Google. I kid you not. And
They
I've
just
been back.
retired Ask.com, like Ask G.
I, yeah,
Done.
no,
Yep.
earlier this week or last week, I guess, right?
Yeah, last week. Crazy.
Yeah. No, so I think, and I completely agree with you. Now it's paying off what I've done over the last 30 years. We're not the biggest agency, but man, because I've been doing this for so long, we're now actually showing up in LLMs, etc. And most of our leads, I kid you not, they now come from large language models, where people find their content, on YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever social media platform we're active on. So absolutely, you're spot on, right? And this is what we're going to talk about here in this podcast. Enough about me. Give the audience the short version. How did you get into SEO?
Oh, the short version. I used to work for an educational software company because because I'm an old person, somewhere between being the COO of a property management company in New York City and teaching in Baltimore's inner city, I ended up working for an educational software company. I was one of the only native English speakers there. And they said, hey, could you write, I love telling this story. Could you write content for us? I'm like, yeah, I can write whatever you want. I'm a great writer. Can you get organic traffic with what you write? I'm like, sure. What's that? And that's how I got into SEO. My first, I don't think it exists anymore. It was Search Engine Land used to have a periodic table of SEO. Do you remember this? And now I remember it's like the first thing. I'm like, wow, this thing looks super cool. Let's check this out. Now I feel old.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
Too funny. Well, we're both, I think, old timers. I'm super excited to have this conversation. Actually, talking about old, hey, let's talk about from manipulation to brand, 30 years of search. Take us back to the early days, Alta Vista, Yahoo, Ask.com, like pre-Google. What did winning look like back then, and why was brand a non-issue?
Well, that was the whole thing of Google. I think people people who are definitely not from the industry, and maybe people who are newer to the industry don't realize like what was the innovation of Google was PageRank. So PageRank basically was an algorithm that said, hey, you know what? Linking is a vote of confidence in the web page. So if multiple other pages are linking to this page, it must be because like people love this page. It's a great page. Obviously, that got manipulated, but that was really the game-changing moment in SEO, obviously, and for algorithm searches in general. But what made that interesting is that Google was trying to replicate a brand move. Google was trying to replicate, hey, how do we have a proxy signal if this is perceived as being good, high quality, and relevant? And that was links, which is ironic because links became the most manipulated thing on the planet. So before links, they were just keywords. Best shoes, whatever, best shoes, best shoes, best shoes, buy best shoes, best shoes. It's sort of like local SEO now, right? New York City plumber near me, New York City plumber near me, best New York City plumber near me is the name of the business.
When did the shift happen? At what point did Google actually start rewarding signals that were really brand signals in disguise, so to speak?
Well, I think that's always what they've been trying to do. Like that was the whole shift. And I think what you've basically seen over time is a move on the spectrum towards that. And it's interesting because if you really want to go like meta with this, no pun intended at the social media platform, is that the incentive cycle to create content has always been what can Google do technology-wise? And what do we have to do to align with that? So the more Google gets better at understanding content, the more SEOs or other content people had to write better content. And where you really saw, I think, that fundamentally change, I think there's two moments. One is like, and I guess I'll tie into the LLM theme, was answer boxes, right? Or featured snippets, really. Not the same thing. But in 2013, 14, Google started to run answer boxes and feature snippets. I'm getting the years wrong. They didn't happen at the exact same time. Answer boxes like, what's the weather in New York City right now? So instead of looking out the window, Google will tell you the answer. You don't have to go to the weather website anymore, weather.com. And that was the first zero-click kind of moment. And then feature snippets also kind of came out at the same time. So that was basically, how many feet are in a mile? How fast would it take me to walk if I was going whatever. And Google will give you a little snippet of content, then the URL. Now there's no URL. And that was one pivotal moment in SEO. And I think that was compounded with what happened with the algorithm was RankBrain, which is very right around the same time. So Google redid its algorithm, again, terrible of the year, 2012, 13, I don't remember. And it was called Hummingbird. And it was a more semantic way to understand the web. Shortly after that, shortly being relative, Google released RankBrain. And RankBrain was the first machine learning property that entered into the algorithm. And I will tell you a conversation. I don't think they mind me telling this. Years after this, I was once at a dinner, and someone from the Google Search Console team was there. And I remember him saying, I know everybody cares about ranking factors. It's not a uniform signal. Like, it doesn't sound controversial, but I remember when this first happened, I remember being on stage at SMX. I'm not going to say who it was. I remember there being so many fights about this. Holy cow. Wow. SEOs love fighting. It's not new. About whether or not ranking factors happen across the board, the universal, or ranking factors happen per vertical, like the health vertical, or, which is my contention on stage, they happen at the query level because it's what machine learning now. And I think that was a moment where the things sort of shifted. And I think you saw the outcome of that years later. I think you saw the first outcome of that, and I'll stop here. I'm just like talking at this point. The first outcome of in a noticeable way that switched the narrative in 2018, when Google ran, well, always had core updates, but it ran the ones where they started announcing them. Was
Mm-hmm.
the first one that was the March 2018 core update, which got overshadowed by what's quote unquote the medic update,
Oh
which
yeah.
was the August 2018 core update, and that's where everyone noticed Google really hit YMYL, your money, your life content, financial, and particularly health content, is why it was called the medic update. And
Yeah.
that's where the whole EAT, or now it's EAT conversation, entered into the fray. And I think that's the first moment in time where I think what we'll call brand for this conversation really entered mainstream SEO narratives.
So yeah, let's talk about EAT and then EEAT. I completely agree. I think that was a major shift, right, that we saw in SEO. So when Google added that second E from, I think, your seat at Wix, what did that actually change for how brands needed to operate?
So it's so funny because it kind of didn't. I think it changed how, and I think you're seeing this shift happen now again. It changed how performance marketers needed to function. Right? Like a brand like Wix didn't really need to change what it was doing. You hit on this before when you said it yourself. I've been doing this for 30 years, and the
Yeah.
digital footprint is so. And I'll like sneak peek at some like data we're probably going to release on this. One of the like questions that like we're interested in is we'll call it domain age, which has always
Hmm.
been a funny question in SEO. SEOs have contended like domain age is a ranking factor, and Google said it doesn't matter how old your domain is. And I'll say I'm not going to spill the tea on the data, but basically that's true. It doesn't matter how old the domain is. What matters is, and correlation is equal causation, but in LLM world it does. What matters is the size of the digital footprint. So after 30 years, you have an amazingly large digital footprint that's comprehensive. It's well known. When I say like it's large, I mean qualitatively and quantitatively, it's refined. Your positioning is specific. You're known for X, Y, and Z. And I'll spill like the tea a little bit. Big companies have that same problem also. It's just you don't see it. So let's just take. I'll use an example. Let's just say like Nike
Yep.
or Adidas. Let's say Nike's like super well known for shoes. So you'll see it show up in LLMs for all of the shoe prompts and all the rankings for shoes and all the AI overs for shoes. And you're like, oh, big brands dominate. What you don't see is, let's say for argument's sake, Nike got into sports coats, which is not a sports thing, just called a sports coat, but let's imagine it's a sports thing. What you don't see is where these companies have, I'll call them fringe product lines or fringe services. They don't do as well because their digital presence is not as big around that. So, let's say, for example, SE ranking,
Yep.
super well known for AI search, SEO. Let's say we added a logo maker, which we don't have a logo maker. That wouldn't do as well as our SEO product, our traffic analysis, our AI search analysis, because that product vis-a-vis SEO ranking isn't a known commodity. So big brands do have this problem. It's just not as noticeable because you're not looking at their fringe products. You're looking at their main product, and they do so well. But they do have this digital footprint problem for products that are newer or services that are newer or more on the fringe of what they actually do or don't do from their core product offering or service offering.
Interesting. Let's talk about, you talk about unsiloing. Can you explain that to somebody who has not heard that term before? And why is that a fix for brand problems?
Marketing teams who've been running TV ads since the 70s haven't had this problem. Marketing teams who are digital based have had this problem for a long time, but don't know they've had this problem until right now. And it's not a new question. It's not a new problem. I'm not the only one who's been talking about this. Folks like Rand Fishkin have been talking about this for years. Attribution is basically a drug we've all become addicted to. And what's happened now is attribution has clearly gotten messier. And what's happened is, along with the attribution becoming messier, the impact of what works has also become messier, which is not a new thing. And you know it's not a new thing, but I think people don't necessarily know that it's not a new thing. You're talking before about your digital presence. It all works together. The way I describe it is search engines and LLMs, they're all moths, and they're just attracted to whatever has the biggest digital light. What marketing teams or digital marketing teams have traditionally done is silo that into channels. So we have our social channel and our social visibility. We have our search channel and our search visibility. We have our PPC and our PPC visibility or conversion, all these different channels. But when you're looking at an LLM, and this goes back to the EAT conversation we were having before, because it's been true for Google for a long time, and I feel like this is where the whole SEO, GEO debate comes in. When you look at an LLM, it doesn't care about the channel. What it cares about is understanding who you are, what you're about, and whether or not you have a digital light that it can grab onto. And in that moment, what happens is the channels become one big ecosystem, which is kind of what we talk about internally all the time at SEO Ranking. It's one big ecosystem. We talk about it in our product also. You'll start seeing that, by the way, pop up more and more in our positioning. I'll give you like a sneak peek on the brand side. It's going to start popping up more and more as we integrate more with our sister tool, Plannable, because you get more ecosystem looks at like what's happening across the digital spectrum. How is what's happening in search impacting what's happening in LLMs? How is what's happening on social impacting what's happening and the inverse? How is what's happening in LLMs impacting search, which we all know about? How is it impacting social? How is it impacting user behavior? How is it impacting traffic? It's all one big ecosystem. Yeah. So teams are now forced to start thinking about things, for lack of a word I don't like using, holistically, which I feel gets so wishy-washy of a word, but they're forced to kind of unsilo, because what happens now in one channel directly or indirectly impacts what happens on the other channel, which has always been the case. But now we're forced to deal with it.
So on that note, I am working on completely redoing the Boulder SEO marketing website, because luckily we've been so busy helping our clients do this stuff, but we neglected our own website, right?
Shoemakers, kids go shoeless.
Yeah. So one thing that I noticed, like the gray area pages, and that's a tip for our audience out there. It's like the about page, the bio pages. They will not get a lot of traffic, but man, they are so important in the age of these large language models, right? Tell me a little bit more about that. And I think it's, it takes old timers to get that, right? Where we're not just chasing ranking and clicks for these pages, but man, if you neglect like the middle, like you're not going to be as successful. Tell me a little bit about that and your point of
I
view.
will tell you, like, when I'm looking to like redo some of the content on our own website,
Yeah.
the main, it's homepage and about page. So
Yeah.
and I will, if you're talking about old people, shout out to Crystal Carter, who was my partner in crime at Wix. I'm not calling you old, Crystal, but there was a webinar we did. I remember people like, why is that the topic? Why your about page SEO is so important. And I'll tell you, there are 2 times on your entire website where you can explicitly tell people who you are and what you do at the global level. And that's your homepage and that's your about page. So instead of talking about our company history or just your company history, that's important too. You should talk about and tell people what you're all about, what your philosophy is. Your positioning should be on your about page. That's gold, because you're allowed to, or you can get away with, for lack of a better way of putting it, with your user and with the search engine and with the LLM, of being very direct about, here's what we're trying to do, here's what we're trying to sell, and here's why. Homepage and about page, that's it.
Yeah. Also, one thing, so you're a brand guy, right? Are you familiar with StoryBrand?
Mm-hmm.
Don Miller. So I've actually implemented that on our website, where you talk about the hero, which is like the customer. It's like, hey, are you missing out on leads because your competitors are ranking higher? And then the problem, the whole, it's like, you're not getting leads, right? And then the guide, us. So we started to implement that on our own website. It's a very simple branding strategy, in my opinion, combined with AI best practices. Dude, you have no idea how well this is working, right? So sometimes, simplify things and focus on the not so sexy stuff that actually gets results.
It's really, I know it sounds complicated,
Yeah.
and there's different frameworks. You could, like, people talking branding about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is ironic because in education that's also a thing you talk about. There's all sorts of frameworks. We can get into the nitty gritty of it, but it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
You're basically trying to do is brand, and then you're going to add on a layer of performance onto this, is fundamentally about connection. And I think that's marketing in general. And this is where I have a hot take on this, that everything should sit under comms because of this. Marketing is just communicating. You're just talking about what you're
Yeah.
doing, what's happening, and with your audience. You're having a conversation. Unfortunately, in digital, we've kind of cliched that conversation a little bit too much. But what you just basically want to do is show the audience who you are while showing them that you understand their problems. But what you just basically want to do is show the audience who you are while showing them that you understand their problems. And you understand, or I'll call them not just their problems, but their life context. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Minivans companies always like crap on minivan companies about this. Horrible. They are so bad because minivan companies will always fall into this trap. And if you're wondering why we're talking about this, because companies in general, people fall into this trap. They end up worrying about their shortcomings with the audience, and then they try to cover up their shortcomings. So a minivan is not fun. Nothing about a minivan is fun. So what do
Yeah.
minivan companies do? They try to, it's sporty. I have 4 kids. Let me tell you, the last thing I actually care about is being sporty. And instead of realizing who you are, like we're a company that does X, Y, and Z for whatever reason, and who your audience actually is, and connecting those two dots, which is your positioning,
Yeah.
companies don't do that. And when you're putting a website together, you're just trying to have some positioning, some connection with the audience, and trying to do that with a layer of performance on top of it to get them to convert, to get them to feel like the urgency to hit the button and the CTA. I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's those two things coming together. It's
Yeah.
performance and brand.
And then just a last note on this. So I do all of the sales calls because I want to make sure we're actually a good fit for
Bless you.
each other, right? But I
Wow,
love it.
sales is like gold insights for like an
Oh, yeah,
audience.
yeah. And I don't
Gold.
sell, I educate, right? And then I take a look at usually the homepage. I tell you in 9 out of 10 times, like you have no idea what they're doing. It's like, yeah.
I once did this for 1,000 websites.
Oh, what? Really?
I went through 1,000 websites, and I went through in 10 seconds could I understand
Yeah.
what the website offers. 70%, I have no clue.
Yeah. And I consider myself a very simple person, right? I'm like, I don't have a lot of patience. If I don't get it, I move on to the next thing. And this
Gone.
is, yeah.
You're
All right. We can geek out in this for a long time. We're at section 2 now. let's, uh,
sorry.
let's, let's briefly talk about the shift from chasing rankings in citations to building presence that compounds. You've said something that's been quoted a lot. Stop optimizing, start resonating. I mean, that's in line with what we talked about. What does that look like in 26 this year that we're currently in?
I think part of the problem, like what's happened, I think it's true about life in general. Almost like therapeutic, is realizing just what's happening around us and what's going on. And what's fundamentally going on is that performance marketing has been going on for years, is kind of hit an inflection point and is starting to have to think a little bit broader, more like a brand marketer than it used to. I'm not saying totally like a brand marketer. They're not a one-to-one. And there's all sorts of brand marketing also. I don't want to like thumb everybody into one box. But what's happening is that the mindset has to start shifting, and lots of people have been getting on this, and you really see like the spectrum when LLMs first came out and to where we are now. It's a very quick shift. But basically, what's happened is that performance marketers have sort of had to expand their universe just just a tad. And what that it means is making a mind shift away from optimizing, which I'm not saying you don't have to optimize. You do have to optimize. But that mindset of, oh, I'll get the optimization and I'll get the quick win, that doesn't work the same way. Because the LLM is particularly ones that don't cite like ChatGPT are not looking at the immediate page in the immediate way, in the immediate sense. It's really looking at the whole picture. And you could see that happen with how it understands brands over time, and especially legacy brands, where certain things are not relevant anymore, but the LLM still thinks they are versus because there's so much web content out there about it.
So last week had a conversation with a fairly large new customer. And one thing that really drives me crazy is the CEOs and the C-suite of these bigger companies. They want to see results in terms of SEO, right? But they don't want to really be involved. They don't want to help with, publishing content on their LinkedIn that, we do. So we're working with the people that, are going to work with us. And we're like, hey, we need to get buy-in from your, ideally, the CEO that, they will put out the content that we create for them once we build it like a nice pillar page, right? Like, talk to me about that. You deal with this branding, like how do you deal with this? How do you get the Opera Suite to do things that help SEO?
Well, that's really like the old question of how do you get buy-in on these sort of things?
Yeah.
And I think there's a few things. One is like really just showing the proxy metric of what's happening. And I think now it's easier than ever. I don't think people realize how easy it is to do a brand audit.
Yeah.
If you're trying to do a brand audit, go to the LLM and go to AI mode. You can do two at one time. Just go to Google, type in, is this brand good at X? And see what it says. But I'll give you an example. I was looking at some competitors for our sister company, Planable, and I
Mm-hmm.
said, what do people think about Hootsuite? What are they saying on social media? And it says their reputation has gone down for X, Y, and Z reason.
Yeah.
I have to verify it now because maybe it's hallucinating or like, fine. You
Yeah.
have a pretty good sense of what's happening. And it's much easier to show what's happening to the C-suite now than it was a year, 2 years ago. But you really have to build that narrative. And I think the metrics kind of show what's happening, right? If you're showing different user behavior on the website, but less traffic. So you're showing, here's the sentiment we have. Do we show up in AI? Forget how you show. Are we showing up the right way in AI? Is it talking about our legacy brand and our legacy product and not our new brand positioning and our new product? This is what people are seeing. And not only that, that's how the internet, because the LLM is a proxy of the internet, that's how the internet understands you, which is not what you want theoretically.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I know. And last word on this. Do you remember a company called Sun Microsystems? It was bought by, I think,
Oh,
Oracle. Anyhow,
yes. I remember the yellow logo with,
yeah,
yeah.
so the CEO, Jonathan, I forget his last name, he had a blog, and that was like years ago, like 10 plus years ago. He blogged every week religiously. I actually read his stuff. It was the most hit content on the entire website, right? So that guy got it. And this is probably like an AI SEO tip for people listening out there. If you want to be successful with this, get your Opera Suite involved. Like, have them actually help you with this stuff.
Yeah. I've seen it firsthand. So
Yeah, exactly. All
hands
right.
down.
Let's talk about brand inside the AI search box. So you actually, I think you wrote that Google is running two duplicate AI products, right? AI overviews and AI mode.
Yeah.
What does that mess tell us about Google itself? Like, how would you explain those two products?
That's a really easy one. If you go back and look at the history, and I think the question is like, what does this say about how we relate to the whole LLM market? 2003, this one I do remember. 2023, February, Bing beat Google to the punch and
Yeah.
announced Copilot. 2 weeks later, Google held a live in Paris event because they were getting slammed. Like, oh, where's Google sitting? Now, Google technologically was way ahead of Bing at this point. They just didn't do anything with the technology in an output way. And they did a live at Paris event. And instead of talking about AI, they talked about Google Lens the whole time. And that's when I'm like, oh man, Google lost its way. They are behind. They're never going to catch up. And the next event, and you could check me on this, the next event is Google I/O 2023. And they announced SGE, which is Search Generative Experience, which are now AI overviews. And you can watch the stock price go up. Then the next year at I/O, they announced AI mode, and you can see the price go up. And then you can see the next year, which was last year, talking about ads in AIOs and AI mode, which is as it really materialized, and the stock goes up. And also they were talking about last year was not just ads, you're talking about computing costs going down. So what you're basically seeing was Google responding to the stock. It needed to reply back to Microsoft or Bing very quickly. So it launched SGE. AI mode, which is the one-to-one competitor to, at the time, I guess, ChatGPT, maybe now Claude, or Gemini, that wasn't a thing yet. They were just ended up replying back to Bing and then having to launch another product to actually compete with ChatGPT. So now they have duplicate products, and I don't think they clearly don't know what to do with them because they've talked about integrating them together. They said that it's coming, but they haven't done it yet, and they haven't talked a lot about it recently at all.
I mean, too, obviously, I very closely follow what Sundar Pichai says because he actually shares really valuable, honest information. I can see where this is going. Google is catching up, right? There's no doubt about it. Well, we're going to have to optimize, we're going to have to do geo stuff, which is about 20% different than the normal SEO stuff. Google's not going to go away. I think they're going to make bigger, better breakthroughs. So I'm excited to see, and that's the last section that we're going to talk about. So be ready for that. But let's quickly talk about Ahrefs came out with a study that showed only about a 14% overlap between top cited domains across Google AI Overviews, ChatGPT, and Perplexity. How should a brand think about being visible across all three when none of them agree on what how do you deal with it? What's your piece of advice? Do you have advice on that?
My advice is to not look at this particular. But the models are completely different. So AI overviews, for example, are tied to the algorithm.
Yeah.
AI mode is very different than AI overviews. Traditionally speaking, I haven't looked at this in a while, so don't quote me on this. It's a podcast that's recorded. How do I not get quoted? But the LLMs that traditionally put more into the output of citations, like AI mode versus ChatGPT, function differently. So what happens is, and it's just a matter of understanding how each one of these functions. Something like Perplexity, which that's a word I haven't heard in a long time, because it's showing so many citations, it's relying more, and Google's even talked about this. It's relying on the immediacy of the URL. In other words, it's looking more at what's in the URL and less, comparatively, since with ChatGPT, than the entire digital footprint of the brand vis-a-vis the topic. Whereas a ChatGPT, which is less citation based, or like a Claude, which is less citation based, than, or at least not citation based, a better way to put it, it's less citation focused in the output, is looking at a much wider lens of the brand's imprint. And it's just a matter of knowing that there are certain models that look more at from an SEO page point of view, like, okay, what's on the page relative to the prompt, versus LLMs that take a little bit more of a wider lens view to it, and just making sure you hit both of those.
Yeah, I agree. So here at BSM, we primarily work with local service businesses, and we now get them into, I call them the top six, right? YouTube, it's a Google product. If you want to be included in AI search, right, including Gemini, etc., you got to be in YouTube. Then Microsoft owns LinkedIn, right? So if you want to be in ChatGPT, you got to be in LinkedIn. And then Reddit, every search that you do on Google, there's like 3, 4 Reddit forums, right? Then Quora, Medium, and Google Business Profile. So to be on the safe side, that's what we do.
Especially for local, the GBP is
Oh yeah,
super important.
yeah,
Huge. And that and local is an interesting place for LLMs because when you're doing a local query
yeah.
or a local prompt, Google and AI, it'll pull in from the profile.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So this is not rocket science, right? All right. Last section here. Let's look forward. Next 18 to 36 months. I think that's way too far out. Like let's say 6 to 12 months. Okay. What does that look like for a brand, search, and AI, and what business should be doing right now? Let me get a little bit more specific here. Let's talk about government and regulation. I think it has to happen, right? Are we going to see real throttling of AI adoption, or is that wishful thinking? What's going to happen with government and AI and search?
Well, I think that's an interesting question because I feel like there's a lot of cultural issues built in around that. So let's take
Yeah.
the US, where there's always I was talking about somebody recently. There's always that little bit of like skepticism built into these sort of things. And I know there's I think it was Time magazine had a
Hmm.
cover of like the people versus AI. I don't know if in every country the culture is like that sort of dynamic or not. So I feel like there's a push in the US to sort of not, I mean, throttles too extreme of a word, but to like make sure there's a check in the system. I think the other part of that equation kind of hits back on what we were talking about a few minutes ago about the stock price. How expensive is this stuff to actually run? How much is being offset by these companies trying to compete against each other? And what does the price eventually look like? And I think it's way more expensive than it is right now. And I think it always comes down to money.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the question. I would imagine we're talking on May 12th. I don't want to break any walls here or not, but Google I/O is coming up soon.
Yeah.
I would expect to hear a lot about, again, cost reduction and cash flow in terms of how are they building revenue out of this, because that's the real question. At what point does the VC money say, hey, where's the actual profit on this? Or the stock price hit the peak where the offset for what it costs Google to run 2 products,
Yeah.
which are where does that, I feel we haven't really hit that point yet. And I think that's the real question.
Well, let's talk about, so Claude. I think they made a major investment in Amazon Web Services, right? And then in return, Amazon invested in Anthropic, and then Google also invested, right? The question, so what we're doing right now, it's not sustainable for the environment. I hate what I do, the compute that we're using, but I got to do it. We got 5 kids. I got a lot of people to pay. So I'm part of the problem, but in a way it's not really sustainable. But now we're starting to see these companies who are competitors. They're like investing into each other. Like, what's your take on that? Where are we going with this? Are these all going to be around in 12 months?
Well, there's a great, I think it's a CNBC video about this very topic about the
Yeah.
investment cycle. And
Yeah.
it's concerning because what it basically means is that there's extra vulnerability in the markets. Because if one thing falls, it has a domino effect now on so many of the other companies. And I think that vulnerability is maybe where you get into the regulation of, okay, what does the government do? Sort of like, we don't want to end up in a 2008 again
Yeah.
situation. I don't know a good answer to that. I really don't. I think that's like I told you before we started, I'll say when I don't know the answer to that. That is really concerning, and I don't know how that plays out.
Well, maybe we're going to talk again in 6 to 12 months. Actually, I'd love to have you. We're going to restart our AI SEO and GEO online summit, I think later this fall. Let's have you talk about that when we know a little bit more, right? Let's do maybe a couple more quickly.
Sure.
So, if somebody like me can automate away people, sadly, we're now actually an AI agency that happens to do SEO and content marketing, etc. I've sadly automated away, I think, 4 or 5, 6 people. I now have my daughter. She's a senior at a university here in marketing. She has to work for me to learn how a business like me is doing AI, SEO, marketing, etc. Very briefly talk about what do you see in terms of job like loss? Like where's it
I
going?
was just asking a bunch of people about this, and it's an
Yeah.
interesting question because at this day, I was talking internally with a bunch of people about this also. I'll tell you, like, I built a Claude skill
Yeah.
that will analyze our content from my brand point of view and whether or not it fits into my way of brand thinking or not. And
Yeah.
obviously, it's not perfect. And I gotta keep messing with it. So this one, on the one hand, you'll say, well, that takes away like a brand editor's job somewhere, which doesn't in this particular case. At the same time, though, it kind of like opens up tons of creativity for me. So it's this weird thing of there's limitation happening, but I can also be way more creative because of AI than I ever could before. Also, so I think when my wife always says, when one door closes, a new one opens, where you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. I think we're just saying yes to something else.
Yeah. I mean, luckily for me, this has been the biggest gift. Honestly, I think AI is benefiting people that been doing this for a long time, that have expertise, because you can accelerate like what you want to do.
Yeah,
In
you can accelerate.
yeah,
And I do think, by the way, that's maybe like maybe biased, but those strategic roles and that strategic thinking, that becomes more of a commodity now.
yeah.
Because
I
the
mean,
things, the go, go, go things I can have the AI do. No one could teach that Claude skill how to think like
yeah,
me.
yeah. I mean, man, I'm building skill after skill because I do so many things every day, and it's like saving me so much
It's
time.
crazy.
So yeah. So that being said, last question. What does brand building look like next year, potentially a few years down the road?
I've been talking about this with Murda Dragomir, who's the CMO of Planable. We actually have a podcast together called Say It Anyway, plug for that.
Oh, cool.
Where we basically take our weekly conversations that we have like a one-on-one and we end up ranting about something about marketing. We put it onto a podcast. But I'll quote her here, and I agree with her. Like marketing or brand in general comes back to being a little bit more old school. And this goes back to something I said earlier. People running ads on TV have sort of had this attribution problem forever. When you're watching a TV ad, how do you know the impact? I mean, the
Yeah,
Nielsen rate, well, fine, whatever. But people have been dealing with that question for a very long time. And I think digital marketing and brand building kind of goes back to that a little bit, where you start thinking more about you saw with Anthropic. That's a great example of that. They doubled down on a certain brand positioning as opposed to being everything for anyone. They refined their brand positioning and it took off. Anthropic wouldn't be where they are now if they didn't hone in a little bit.
yeah.
I don't know where they'll be next week because these things seem to flip all the time, but that was a really good move. And I think that's where brand is going, to honing in and refining. Google said we're in an age of expansion. I think we're in an age of refinement.
Interesting. Well, I can, from personal experience, so last year we started to rebrand the BSM, the Bold SM marketing website, where we try to be, everything to everybody. I'm like, you know what? No, we're going to focus on Colorado. There is so much business here. We are really good at working with local service businesses, right? That's when we implemented the StoryBrand methodology. Oh my God, it worked so well. Back to the roots. I started this business like 15 years ago as a local service SEO business, and it's working. It's simple.
Yep.
All right. Any last thoughts before I'm going to hit you with a few rapid fire questions here?
Let's do the rapid fire. I love those.
Oh, sweet. I'm not sure if you're a drinker. If you were, wine or beer?
Wine.
All right, cool. Why? Why wine?
It used to be beer. I don't know. I think I think it's more sophisticated on the
Yeah.
palate now that I'm an old person. I don't know.
God, that shift is happening with me as well. That's
I used to love beer way more than wine.
yeah. Dogs or cats?
Dogs,
Beach or mountain?
mountains, not even close.
Indian or Chinese food?
Chinese food, hands
AI
down.
or
American version Chinese food. That's
American version? Sweet.
yeah.
AI overviews or AI mode?
Oh, AI mode.
Claude, Gemini, or ChatGPT?
Claude.
Yeah. All right. That is it. Well, hey,
Oh, you thought you were gonna
Mordy.
ask me a hard one or something personal. Phew.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Tell me why Claude?
I think it's just more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah.
do way more things, and it's just they did a good job building that positioning and building out the by the way, building out the product to match the positioning.
Yeah.
The reason why beach versus mountains, I grew up across the street from the beach. Like, I don't know, the beach doesn't like I never went, and then doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, I think the last 5 guests on my podcast all Claude, so there's a trend there, right? Hey,
Seems
Mordy,
so.
this has been the kind of conversation our industry doesn't have enough of. You're framing off brand as the real game, unsiloing as the universal fix, and EEAT as a confidence score for large language models are concepts I'm going to keep referencing for a long time. Where can people find you, follow your work at SE Ranking, and connect with you?
First off, check out SE Ranking on the social platforms. Every Tuesday, we put out a little thing called Let's Chunk, which I got to have you on, and let's do that. I got to do a next round of scheduling next month, where we go through like just bite-sized information about what's happening. Look for me on LinkedIn. I'm kind of on X.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to follow what you do at SE Ranking. Again, I have actually been a brand ambassador for I think 4 or 5 years now. I don't make money. SE Ranking
I
gives my
can verify that.
yeah. No, SE Ranking gives my students, I teach at universities, free access to their tool, which is invaluable, right? So in return, I'd like to promote that amazing tool.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to follow your work there. Any last thoughts? Anything else?
No, I just think it's a different way of thinking, and it's hard. It's challenging. I was like, it's not easy.
Yeah,
Change is never easy, and changing mindset is always very difficult.
I can agree more. Morty, this has been awesome. Always, thank you so much for listening to the AI SEO Insider Podcast. My name is Chris Ralph. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much.
Right.
Bye.